Yeah, hello, Arvind.
Hi, Akash. How are you?
I'm doing good. How are you?
Good, good. Thank you for making the time for this and hosting the session.
Thank you actually for coming in. It's a
Oh,
pleasure.
no, no, I'm really looking forward to it.
Glad to hear that. So let me quickly introduce you to our audience over here today. So we have with us Arvind Balasundaram, who is an influential leader in the fields of insights and analytics, particularly. So, particularly speaking about predictive analytics and other fields of analytics. He also is a stalwart leader in the field of data science and machine learning, as well as AI. Now, his contributions to healthcare and biotechnology in particular, coupled with wonderful recognitions that he has earned, such as the AI 100 Award, make him a distinct personality in this field. Now, in order to underscore his impact and to understand how he has influenced the industry, today's session will be helpful for you guys. And he's currently serving as the Executive Director of Commercial Insights and Analytics at Regeneron Pharmaceuticals, to be precise. And he has such a rich history when it comes to leading and transforming analytics, and especially in his domain of healthcare as well, that it will be an honor to get to know from him about his rich experience and the vast knowledge he has amassed through the years. Thank you, Arvind, for being here with us and for gracing us with your presence.
Akash, thank you so much for that very kind introduction, and thanks to Swati and Raghav and Futurense for hosting this. I'm really looking forward to it.
Thank you. So, our audience over here today would like to know a bit more about your journey and what you have been through over the years. So, you have played a very significant role when it comes to healthcare and biotech industry in particular. So, how have you seen data analytics evolve over the years in your particular sector?
That's a great question, Akash. I can spend a whole day on that subject just because, and you're okay with me being bilingual, right? In the course of my interaction. So
Absolutely.
jitna change hua hai in my career in this field, I can probably speak a lot about it, but I'll tell you the main things. I think the fundamental change in our discipline has been going from not having enough to having too much, right? And so ये बताना चाहता हूँ मैं कि part of a career journey is always a learning component, because I think in my field, and I would argue probably in any field, you never get good enough to be comfortable because there's something always changing, right? And in my background, if I have to look back when I started in this this line about 30 years ago, a very long time ago, I vividly remember having to carry huge desktops, because we had work from home at night and we didn't have laptops, right? So that was the day, and we had no data. And so whatever little data we had, we were detective the hum. We spent most of the time looking for what numbers we can get our hands on, and yadi there's enough of a sample to be able to kind of do analytics with. Up to the whole equation has changed. Now there's just so much data coming at us so quickly, and everything needs to be done as soon as it arrives. So, I've gone from, I would say, being a detective, as I tell people, to being a curator, meaning, just because itna data hai doesn't mean all of it is necessary to answer a question. And so the entire role has changed, and that has fundamentally involved components of learning, right? So I was lucky enough when I started, I went to a college in the United States where, it's called liberal arts. It's kind of the same concept as what they do in Shantiniketan, for example, where, they start you off with this assumption that all knowledge is based on, ultimately confessing your ignorance to things that you can learn, right? And that's a very healthy spirit to have. And so I think much of my journey, I would tell you, in data and analytics has been transformational in change. It has required, I think, an attitude not to fear change. And I was not there when I started. जब मैं start किया तो, especially when I had come from India to the US, थोड़ा सा डर है कि, am I prepared for the circumstance? You're surrounded by people who seem considerably more knowledgeable than you. and it needs a change in attitude to say, change is a good thing, and change is an opportunity, because if everything remained the same, then there'd be millions of experts in everything, right? And so I see change as an opportunity. Data and analytics has been a huge sea change, and so that's what I would tell you. Relating it back to my journey has made me very comfortable with not only what I've been through, but what I'm looking ahead, right? Because we're still changing. So that's what I would tell you, Akash.
Absolutely. So, just as a follow-up to that, you mentioned about change and change over the years, and now there is the problem of plenty instead of scarcity. So, I'm sure at Regeneron, you lead a diverse team across multiple business units. So, how do you approach the unique analytical challenges in your domain or in different domains actually? Because different teams and people under you would be approaching you with unique challenges. So how do you solve those challenges across different business units?
So that's another great question, right? And these are very exciting times in my field, and I'm hoping in your audience, बहुत से लोग हैं जो are in data analytics, because मैं जो बताता हूँ, especially with younger people, I'm very, very envious about the world they're going to inherit, right? Because it's so challenging, and it's so dynamic, and it's so exciting. But to come back to your question, right? I think the apex of change in data analytics is actually what I would call augmented analytics. And what I mean by that is, no longer is it enough to be a specialist. Because जब मैं graduate किया, first 2-3 years, my first few jobs, I was like a market research person. I would do surveys, and that's all I did. And then somebody else would do analytics, and get on a computer and parse those numbers. Somebody else would do competitive intelligence, kind of find out about a competitor. Somebody else would be a data specialist. Up to all of that has all meshed together, right? Now we are dealing with machine learning, artificial intelligence, where the whole notion of analytics is no longer restricted to numbers, right? Like in my profession now, a simple, if you take any healthcare record, right? If somebody goes to a physician, just say India, let's say somebody goes to a hospital, leg में कुछ दर्द है, तो scan लेते हैं, right? तो scan now can be analyzed just like numbers, right? So it's very important now not only to be a specialist in, let's say, analytics, but to also be a generalist around how that analytics actually sits with other disciplines to tell a broader story, right? So the big word right now, Joe, I'm sure many people in the audience have heard, is data storytelling. Or exactly that's what it means, right? Ki not only is it enough to be a specialist in your area or your subdomain of the field, but you have to be a generalist to be able to understand, as I tell people, understand enough to be dangerous, right? You don't have to be an expert at everything, but it's no longer enough to just be an expert at one thing, because the success of people in my area depends on the ability to tell a story, and that's getting harder because there's a lot more inputs. There's much quicker timelines to be able to deliver these things. So ये skills बहुत जरूरी हो गए हैं, and I think it's very important in the audience, again going back to what I said, to be very open-minded कि जितना भी successful है हम specialist discipline में, there are other disciplines that are necessary to really be successful.
Perfectly put there. So you have been recognized with prestigious awards like the AI 100. So what do these accolades mean to you, and how do they reflect on your work? Do they inspire you? Do they motivate you, or do you take them along the way in your stride as you go along? So what can our audience over here look forward to when they proceed with their careers in terms of getting such accolades eventually?
And that I really like the fact that the award system exists out there, right? And more than personal honor, it's a recognition, I think, of me and my team, and a vision that there's innovation that is necessary in everything that we do, right? And it's a you need things like that, because if you didn't have an incentive for people to go and seek change, change would never happen, right? And change is difficult because it involves failure, right? So while there's an award for something, there's a number of other things that have not gone as well, right? And so I see an award as really a recognition of the effort to, embrace things that are different, and it does lead to success, and so it's an incentive to keep that line of thinking. And what I would tell the audience is, it's very important to not be comfortable in the learning and the job, right? It's important to be restless. It's important to be disruptive, in the sense that just because सब लोग यहाँ गए doesn't mean आप भी वहीं जाइए, right? There may be some other way of looking at things, right? एक एग्जाम्पल मैं शेयर करूंगा, इन वन ऑफ द ओलंपिक्स, आप तो लॉन्ग जंप और हाई जंप मोस्ट पीपल देखते होंगे टीवी पे, and many years when people would jump, they would essentially come straight and try to jump in the long jump, and that was the technique, and over the bar. And then some gentleman came along called Fosbury, जो American था, and he said, why should I just jump over the bar? Why don't I just twist myself and try to go over the bar in a very convoluted fashion, right? And he ended up breaking the world record and winning a gold medal, and he broke the record by considerable distance than somebody else, right? So it's an example of why you need to think about problems in innovative ways, and as complexity increases, for example with data and analytics, these types of awards are a reminder that we should constantly be open-minded. We should, other people's views ko sunna chahiye. There's often tremendous ideas, that come from other places. And it's just a testament to teamwork. It's a testament to, being able to listen. And it's a testament to innovate. Yep, that's what I would tell you, Akash, and the audience. And it's a great
Yeah,
feeling.
yeah, thank you, Arvind. So basically, being open to changes and being on the lookout for new methodologies and not being stuck by the old methods, and constantly evolving and adapting to new information being put out there. Yeah.
Correct.
Thank you so much
Yeah.
your insight on this. Now, also, you mentioned about things that our audience members should be doing. But given your experience, what do you think are some common misconceptions about data science and its use in the healthcare industry? What are some don'ts, in your opinion, that people can avoid, or especially people who are trying to make a career early into this field, what they can avoid and how they can address them, especially when it comes to data science in healthcare industry?
Yeah, so data science in itself is a very nebulous definition, and यदि आपके audience, if they Google data science, they'll get 300 different definitions. And the person who coined the term data science themselves basically said, oh, it's a combination of somebody who does a lot of analytics and is very good at Python, and is able to do many different things, right? So it goes back to the point I said, data science sounds like a very specialized area of interest, but when you apply it, it involves very generalized skills, right? So one of the big misperceptions, I think I would tell you, to many encounter here, and I had to kind of make some changes, is there's this, you feel when you go into a job, and I think in the beginning it is necessary, right? You need to show yourself as an expert in one particular aspect of data science, right? But as you progress and as you start, dealing with more senior people in a company, what you quickly find out is, there's a lot more beyond that specialization. There's a lot more where you need to adapt to circumstances. You need to really, also stop trying to solve the problem immediately, right? So I would tell you the one big thing, which if I had to go back in my own career and I would need to fix, would be, don't jump to solving a problem. Data science mein ye hota hai a lot, right? Where somebody says, okay, this is a machine learning problem. We need to go find patients. For example, healthcare mein machine learning has a lot of applications, right? When, let's say, cancer may, you have a few patients that are on a product, you have many other patients you can go and find based on machine learning applications, right? So if people ask you a question, the tendency is to say, oh, I have machine learning and apply kar sakte and we'll come back to you with an answer, right? But I think one of the greatest values of somebody who's going into data science or into analytics is actually somebody who first listens and questions whether the objective that is being requested is correct. Right? If you look at maybe 60 to 70% of cases where analytics is applied, it's applied very well from a skill standpoint, but it's answering the wrong question, which means the business doesn't really see the value of what was delivered. Right. And the reason that happens so much is a lot of people, like I myself have done, ये tendency है कि हम analytics के आदमी हैं, question तो उनका है, my job is to solve the problem, right? But the one misconception, the biggest misconception I would say, is you need to be intelligent at framing and reframing business questions, because a lot of people think they're asking the right question, but they're not, right? So that's one thing. The second thing I would say is there's a big reliance on businesses to look at what happened as a predictor of what's going to happen, right? Yeah, tendency is a very human tendency. And just because it's just how we are wired, right? Ki kuch ho gaya, something went right or something didn't go right. So yeah, assumption hai ki okay, to wo hua to kal wahi hoga, right? And so there's an excessive reliance on what I would call reporting versus predictive analytics, right? Reporting ye hai, which is, you're driving a car, up rear view mein jo dikhta hai, you look at that and you drive forward. If you did that with a real car, you'd have an accident, right? So why would you apply that philosophy always to business? It's necessary sometimes, but not all the time, right? So it's very important as a data scientist to think and say, am I over relying on reporting? Am I looking at what happened 2 or 3 days ago? And am I too confident that that's going to happen in the future? Versus, what might actually happen if I look through the windshield? Could I see some things that happened yesterday actually shift so profoundly that, the outcome in the future would be very different, right? So those are the two things, Akash, I would highlight going forward as very, very key bits for analytics professionals and data science professionals, right? So those are ask or re-ask the question, feel like you're responsible for the question being asked, because the quality and value in the answer you provide depends on the question being fundamentally worded correctly and stated correctly. Okay, that's the important piece. And the second is help the organization, help your stakeholders to drive looking through the windshield, not always through the rearview mirror. Those would be the two things I would tell you.
So moving forward and basically having a larger picture of the overall goal rather than a myopic vision of the task at hand. That's really wonderful advice, Arvind. So what we have a question from one of the audience members, which is pertaining to pursuing masters. So they are asking, is going for masters in AI field worth it if someone has a good job in India already in AI itself? So is it worth it to go for masters in US or at a reputed institution and to further the career?
Yeah, so a master's, I mean, education, I'm married to a university professor, right? And I'm very partial to education, because I think one of the things you get in a master's setting is a unique combination of, the theory behind, let's say, data science, as well as the application context. And ये तो बहुत important है, right? And let me give an example of, what I did in my career, and that might be helpful to the audience, right? Is when I did my MBA many years ago, I had the option to say, chalo, let me do the standard MBA, karte hain, do the, the introductory course in marketing and finance and this and that, and then we'll be done, right? But instead, what I chose to do was, I said, that's good. That's a good foundation, but why don't I go supplement it with some master's level courses and some doctoral level courses in things like modeling, things like econometrics, which is the next stage of statistics, experimental design. Ab A/B test karte hain, that's all experimental design, right? And so when I did that many years ago, people in my class and other colleagues, they thought I was crazy, right? Why would you go, you have something in hand, it's working. It's very similar to the question that's being asked, right? Is if something's working, why mess with it, right? But if I reflect back on that, without that foundation, without understanding the context of how you solve problems, I would not be where I am because, even though I don't do some of these things, I'm constantly working, for example, with consulting companies, but I'm able to go and have a discussion with them around the foundational principles of these models. This only happened because I chose to invest in, master's and doctorate level courses, right? So there is an immense benefit, I think, Akash, to doing that. It just depends how high you want to aim, right? Because the more you learn, and the more you learn about not only how to do something but how to get something done, right? And this is a fundamental other distinction that I think is important is we look at companies. I look back in my own career. We are all trained to in India particularly, right? I went to school in India. We're trained to be functional experts, right? Jo ye karna hai, chalo, in school we've all grown up with mathematics mein 100% milna hai usme, we're functionally disciplined, right? So we are very good at programming, we're very good at doing some concrete functional tasks. But if you look at आपका ambition है कि चलो I want to run a country, I want to be in higher management, anywhere in the world, आप देखिए तो the people who are successful at leadership are not just experts at doing things, they're experts at getting things done, right? Yeah, it's a very important difference, right? And so if you want to be an expert at getting things done, you need to understand the context of all of the different skills that you're not an expert in. And that's where a master's and I think what you guys are doing, which is a fascinating idea, right? Is and tying up with partners in the US, you're giving people the context to be able to apply some of these functional skills. And I think that will go a very long way for their success.
Absolutely. And especially we think with the remote culture setting in with hybrid work and all, working with teammates across countries, across continents, this setup is going to give them an early exposure to getting to know individuals from different backgrounds and of different mindsets.
Without a doubt, right? And we're in a global world, right? So I think when I look back at and I spoke to Raghav briefly when he was in the US, and it's a fascinating concept, right? You're literally helping folks kind of take advantage of the globalization, right? And it's a tremendous opportunity because you can make one of the things I like about the US. I love India, I love the US. I kind of still visit India quite a bit. What is phenomenal about the US is, if you're dedicated and you're disciplined up, you're very committed to, chalo, kaam karna hai, karenge, hard work karenge, you will get the reward, right? And that educational difference, it's a little different from India. And, but to get the immersion in India, kind of like I got, and then get an experience of how that's applied and how people navigate that journey in the US in a global context would make somebody a much better candidate at their position than someone who's just grown up within a single cultural institution, right, if you will. So absolutely, is I think it's a great advantage to be able to bridge across cultures because it's going to be an asset.
Well, that brings me to an interesting question, actually, Arvind. If you could wind the clock back, if you could go back in time, what advice would you give to a younger Arvind just starting out in his career? What would you do differently, or what would you focus more on?
Yeah, so I keep winding my clock back. Unfortunately, with digital stuff now, it's not easy to wind it back anymore. But so the thing I would say, the point I just made, right, is I think I spent a lot of time being an expert in function, right? And for many years, job first job mein tha, we would do SaaS programming karte the, we would do a lot of and I spent an enormous amount of time, talking about the program I used, or, what kind of multivariate technique I used, which is great. It makes you feel good because, you're able to talk about, expertise you acquired. But, in retrospect, जब back देखते हैं, तो, you wonder, room में, you are probably the only multivariate statistics expert. Instead of spending the time talking about, let's say, cluster analysis or, factor analysis, if you could translate that into simple, a simple way for somebody who had no idea what that was, right? It would probably have helped me a lot more, right? And if I learned some of the things that I said much earlier than I did, that would have been great, right? But some things I wouldn't change. Like, in 2013, when I left my job at Johnson and Johnson, I decided, you know, मैं देख रहा था everybody is doing digital stuff, Google Analytics चल रहा है. This is not what I learned in school, right? And I said, I have a choice. I can continue to be the person who is, going to focus on everything I learned in graduate school at tremendous effort that I put in, or I'm going to say, there's a lot that's changed and I'm going to learn something and I want to go back to school to learn it, right? So मैंने क्या किया? I did a certification in data science. I did a certification, in digital analytics, understood that whole ecosystem. So that thing I would not change. And that has actually also been the way I've gotten into AI, right? Is I'm, way before AI has become the buzzword, I was always interested in the evolution of machines and how we augment analytics with it. But, you know, you constantly want to be learning, which is something I would have done more of going back. And, otherwise, I think, the choices I made on a career, the one thing I would tell people is, many people have no idea what they want to do. And that's, in my, I'm not singularly directing it to the audience, but even people I worked with, when I have career conversations with them, they have no idea what they want to do, right? And they come and say, I want to do that. So then I ask them, is that something that will help you with eventually where you want to go? And they said, oh, we have no idea where we want to go. So मैं पूछता हूँ, do you ever get into a car? आपको नहीं मालूम है कहाँ जा रहे हैं. आप इग्निशन लगाते हैं, गाड़ी चल रहा है, जहाँ जहाँ जाना है वहाँ जाएंगे. How many times have you done that? Nobody does that, right? So it's important, I think, also for people to start framing what I call the career GPS. मैं क्या करना चाहता हूँ, मैं क्या नहीं करना चाहता हूँ. That's a point that I wish I had done better going back in a reflective way. And related to that, Akash, is, it helps you what I would call position your brand, right? They say Apple, they all stand for a differentiated benefit they bring, right? So मैं क्या offer करता हूँ? How am I different from the next person? That doesn't materialize automatically, right? सोच समझ के करने पड़ता है. It's a very purposeful activity. I wish I had put more time into that earlier in my career. Now I think a lot about it, and I think, I'm glad I am doing what I'm doing, but I think if I'd been a little more deliberate on that, it might have happened sooner. I might be enjoying it a lot more than, the process that I took to do it. So those would be the few things I would share in a reflective way.
Yeah, thank you, Arvind, for sharing this major turning point in your career with us. Now, you mentioned the importance of learning and kind of always being on the lookout to grow, like you did. Uh, Can you share in your work, like over the years, can you share any breakthrough project or initiatives or ideas that has come to your mind or that you have led, which has significantly ended up impacting business decisions or the outcomes in your field, and how you would attribute to or that you would attribute the maximum amount of on-job learning that you have done in your career from that particular thing that you have
Yeah,
taken up?
yeah, there's a few, but I'll try to focus on actually a product that I know now is generic, so I can share this information. I also think a lot of people in the audience would have used this product. It's called azithromycin, which is an antibiotic, which
Yeah.
you get routinely in India now. I was lucky enough to be on the launch for that brand at Pfizer when I was there, right? And so I remember when we were launching that, it was originally indicated for a condition called otitis media, which it's basically a earache. that young kids get, right? So it pains a lot. Young children, bahut takleef hota hai. They cry. It agonizes parents. There's a very high emotional burden for parents, right? So, mere group mein we were looking at, okay, how are we going to bring this product to the marketplace? Antibiotics to bahut se hain, right? What is going to make this click, right? So, हमने project किया, and what we found out was that efficacy, which is what most people want. आपको बीमारी है तो the main thing you want is जितने जल्दी हो सकता है, I want the relief, right? So efficacy is always the most important thing in infectious disease. Usme we didn't have much of a difference from what was already available, right? But हमारे जो value offering था, and if you've taken this medicine, as most people have, it comes in 5 pills, right? आप दो first day में लीजिए, and then you take 1, 2, 3, and you're done. And the advantage of this product was convenience, right? आपको उस efficacy मिलना है तो दूसरे antibiotic से आपको at least 2 or 3 times a day 10 दिन के लिए लेने का है. इसमें आपको 5 to 6 pills में हो जाता है काम, right? But how do you then bring a product that is convenient when everybody wants efficacy? ये challenge था. And so one of the learnings and one of the projects that I think we were able to do very well here was we were able to create a perception of what we call conveniently delivered efficacy, right? So आप दो pieces लीजिए, आप combine कीजिए. People think it's a very different thing. It was, now you were able to get 10 days of equivalent therapy in 5 pills, right? Another case that I was lucky to work on is a drug called Lipitor in cholesterol reduction, right? And usme, the idea there was when we looked at the research, cholesterol to most people have, and आपको the idea is आप patient हैं जो आपको action लेना है, आपको बीमारी है कोलेस्ट्रॉल में, ठीक है, हाई है आज, लेकिन कल कुछ तो होने वाला नहीं है, या मे बी 10-15 years में आपको कुछ होगा, राइट? वो मेंटालिटी थी एट दैट टाइम. तो जब हमने लॉन्च किया तो ये दिस बिकेम वेरी ऑब्वियस, राइट, कि कोलेस्ट्रॉल इज ए कंडीशन most people should be very concerned about because over time it leads to heart attacks. लेकिन if you leave it like that, people will essentially say, अरे हार्ट अटैक तो 30 साल के बाद होने वाला है, आज क्या करने का है, right? That was so then we started going to this notion of how do you understand your numbers when you leave a doctor's office. That was a very, very innovative way of starting to talk about heart attacks, right? Is don't go to just the risk, but make the risk immediate. Like if you don't take action, risk so that was a very different way of conceiving it that time. That was another project, Akash, that I think was very disruptive in its thinking in healthcare. There have been a number of others. I'm just kind of picking some that I can share with you. There's a number of projects I'm involved in now, because medicine and the mechanisms of medicine have changed. Abhi gene editing hai, CRISPR-Cas9, which is a gene-based therapy is available. So there's a lot of different things that require very, very different ways of thinking, right? And I think some of these formative projects where, I was able to get comfortable with challenging the way people thought about these things really, really helped kind of, help me with proposing new things now and being able to function that way now. So I would share those 2 projects with you.
Those are really interesting to know about, and especially the thing about azithromycin that you mentioned. I just took it a couple of days ago, having suffering from the seasonal changes over here. And
Yeah.
yes, there is a noticeable efficacy difference, perceived difference in efficacy as compared to other competitors. So really glad to know that one.
Yeah, no, that's that. My father periodically takes that product, and I brought him a mug that says Zithromax when I worked on it several years ago. So I keep telling him, you're drinking a coffee out of a mug, that now you're taking the tablet yourself. So it's one of the medicines I think I've been really happy to have been involved with. Yeah, but it continues to be a really, really good product in the market.
Wonderful. So, few of our audience members have some very interesting questions, such as one of them is asking that data science is a booming field currently, right? So there are a lot of things going on parallelly. It's quite cluttered for someone who is new to the field. So, is there any limitations in this field which may make it less demanding in the future? Which is a very interesting question, I think. Everyone is optimistic about it, but are there any repercussions that you can foresee?
I think the only constraints in data science are going to be two, which I alluded to. One is, I think data science is going to go from a very specialist to a very generalist emphasis, right? So the ability to be able to, let me go back, right? I think let me address it this way. There's an increasing gap between the ability of data scientists to do their work and explain it to senior leadership in their companies. Because, let's say आप, TensorFlow use करके कुछ करते हैं. That doesn't mean anything to somebody who's running a company, right? Or somebody who's senior in a company. So the people who are going to be successful in data science are going to be people who can do those things, but who can also explain in very simple terms what they did and why it adds value to the question being asked, right? Because capabilities and techniques and fields are growing at such an alarming pace. It is not going to be feasible for businesses to keep investing money in all of those areas, including artificial intelligence and Gen AI and all of that, right? So the people who are going to be successful are the people who can explain why we are doing it and what it means to someone who could not do that, right? So that I think is going to be critical. We're already seeing it. In my group, we are looking at upskilling talent, right? Is because we have a number of people who are very good at writing Python code, but are not very savvy at being able to explain what that code is actually doing. आप activation function लिखे हैं, आप what does that actually mean, and why are you using one function over another, and what does it mean for the business, and the question that you used a logistic function versus a ReLU function. These are skills that most people probably know in Python, but it's going to be very important to be able to explain that in simple English. And those will be the successful people in the future. I don't think data science is going away, but the ability to be able to talk about data science to the broader masses is a skill that's still very, very scarce.
Yeah, decomposing complex things in simple terms for
Correct.
business and upper management to understand is always a useful thing. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So one more question that we have over here from our audience members is how do they know what they're supposed to learn in terms of tools or technologies or maybe new subjects or topics in order to succeed in getting a job, let's say in the data science field or maybe in the pharmaceutical domain. So what are the skills they need to focus on and how they can absorb those skills?
Yeah. And that's another great question, right? And the way I would answer that, Akash, is I think you want to focus on what I call skills and competencies, right? So you need skills and competencies to be successful in a job. So क्या difference है इसमें, right? Skill is just, you know, like a functional skill. आपको Python आता है, आपको market research आता है, आपको predictive analytics आता है. This is a skill, right? Competency is how you deliver that skill, right? Do you deliver it in a persuasive fashion with the people you work with? And what I mean by that is, just because I think we should use predictive analytics to solve a problem doesn't mean that 20 other people who are sitting in a room with me on my job think that makes any sense. They may think there's some other way of doing it. So there's two ways to solve that problem. One is, insist on, I know my field and this is how I'm going to do it, and continue to argue your position. The other way is to hear them out and try to persuade them and enroll them into your agenda. That process is what I would call a competency. It's how you deliver your skill, right? So the two things I think that are important for success in a job and a career is, picking up the skills as they change, right? And there's no right answer to say, hey, do this versus do that. You've got to be very active in a community like LinkedIn, or, keep your eyes and ears open for the evolution of your field. It doesn't, whether it's analytics or not, every field is evolving, right? If you need to pick up machine learning, if you need to pick up generative AI, there are ways to do it. And I think what's been great, especially with what you guys are doing, is before you would have to go to university somewhere and enroll formally in a curriculum. I think it's tremendous what you're doing, right? You're bringing these skills to people, and you're almost saving them steps around what is pertinent for their futures, right? The piece I think they're going to have to pick up is, once I get trained in all these functional skills, what are some of the things I need from a competency basis? How do I embrace change? How do I advocate others into a change mandate? How do I explain complex concepts to people who don't understand it? Those kinds of things. How do I take what we would call prudent risk, right? In any business decision, there's often uncertainty, right? And this is an area where we all know AI doesn't do very well. This is where the human aspect of a job is so important, even with data science and AI and everything, right? How do you help your stakeholders and your audience around you navigate uncertainty, right? These are things that, and there are course offerings in LinkedIn that are free, where they address these things. How do you become better at competencies? And this, in my view, is what makes somebody really successful in a job and a career, right? Is, when you have performance reviews, for example, in any company, the biggest point of difference between, let's say, somebody who is making a case for their growth versus, managers who they're having a conversation with, is people are talking about their skills when managers are saying we want competencies, right? So this is the one place, Akash, I would say there's a lot of self-learning involved. There's some humility involved. All of us can get better at competencies. We're never good enough, right? And so that's what I would say would really add value to the skills they're learning through what you guys are doing, and what else that they're learning outside.
Absolutely, Arvind. Learning is a lifelong process, and we can always aim to be better versions of ourselves.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, one more interesting question that I had in mind was, you mentioned many different skills, such as mentorship or be it leadership. Now, these are obviously crucial in any field to succeed and to grow later in, especially in the later parts of your career. So, can you share any instances of how these aspects have played a role in shaping your professional journey and how they have become more and more relevant over the years for you?
Yeah, and I think, let me pick on mentorship, right? I had a mentor in my first job. Um, and he would really drive me to the wall sometimes, because I was in a consulting company. I was, a very hectic atmosphere. And once, essentially what happened was, I was very early on in my career. It was getting frustrating with a project. He was fairly senior in the company, and it just got to me, and we had a powwow, right? I essentially went, मैंने चिल्लाया, उसने चिल्लाया, everything happened. And I still reflect upon that incident many, many years ago, because it was extremely critical for me in the mentorship he provided. Because he was very senior in the company. He could very easily have gone back home and said, this guy is such a junior guy. He has, the audacity to kind of challenge me and, do all these things. I don't need this guy, right? That was an easy thing to do. But instead, I think usne kya kiya, he decided he would use that opportunity as a teaching and coaching moment, right? And he essentially taught me that day, I think, a couple of things, right? One is why it's important to listen to a different point of view, right? And even if you disagree with it, and even if, let's say, you don't come to consensus, why it's important to reflect upon a situation like that and spin it positively to make somebody who might have become an adversary, instead become, somebody who goes with your agenda, right? So that's a simple teaching moment that happened many years ago that I still remember every day. It has shaped how I kind of run my teams. And there have been several things like that. I remember a couple of projects which I did that didn't produce the results. It failed, right? And very easily somebody could have said, hey, this guy doesn't know what he's doing. But and I was very junior at that time, right? And that's not what they did. What they did was, essentially send the message that आप try nahi karenge, तो how are you going to get something different, and how are you going to be innovative? And that has been, again, a mentoring moment that has shaped my philosophy for most of my career, right? And so I think it's very important to get good mentors. I think mentors are extremely valuable, especially the ones, mentors they come in different shapes and sizes, right? My advice is always find a mentor who wants to spend more time talking about you, not about themselves, right? And those are a handful, but they're precious. And if you find one of those, don't ever let them go, whether you're in the same job or not, right? It's very important to have somebody with that humility who really blossoms, I think, the way you shape through your career. And so I have a few like that, Akash, that I would never want to let go. And many of my mentors have retired, but we still, keep in touch because they've been very, very important beacons in my journey forward, right? And what I'm doing.
Rightly said so. And when it comes to such people, they are a rare few indeed, and you would want to have them in your inner circle for sure. And many mentors uh, have shaped up our careers and the careers of my juniors, as I know as well. And as a part of our program also, we do offer mentorship as well, sometimes one-on-one, sometimes in a group, because we do know the value of a helping hand and what role it can play in shaping up, especially the early parts of your career.
Yeah, and it's phenomenal what you guys do, right? I've told Raghav this when he was in New York, is the best part of anything, is giving back, right? And I think, it's always good to get things, but it's even better to give back, right? And so, it's something I love to do. I think, giving back is also important for my own growth, right? Because you learn things, only by teaching it or only by sharing it do you uncover things you need to learn, right? And so it's a really important piece. And I can't say enough about the program you guys have and what you're doing. But if there's any way to help anyone in the audience or any way to in whatever capacity of mentorship, that's something that I would absolutely love to do. And so I really look forward to that as well. But thank you for what you're doing.
And thank you, Arvind, for those wonderful words and for expressing the interest to be available to our audience members over here. It's a priceless opportunity, I would say, for anyone to have the kind of insights that you have accumulated over your careers. And I'm pretty sure that we all would leave this session over here all the more wiser, a little bit more knowledgeable than we came into this session. So thank you so much for your wonderful time, for taking out the time of your busy day, out of your busy day, and spending it with us and making us richer in terms of knowledge and experience.
Thank you, Akash, and I really wish your audience well, and I think they've taken the first step in the journey, and again, I will say I'm very envious of their journey because their world is going to be so much more exciting, and I think they should feel very empowered to, rather than to operate out of curiosity rather than fear, right? Change is always going to be around, but the curious people are going to win, and I think all of them will do really well. And I'm on LinkedIn. If they want to reach out, I'm more than happy to connect and share anything that they want. And I learn a lot from them as well. So thank you to you and Swati and to Raghav for arranging the session.